If you look at the greatest leaders of all time, the best stand up comedians, or just the most interesting person that you know, one thing they have in common is that they can tell great stories. According to Steve Jobs, the co founder of Apple, the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. Mastering the art of telling great stories is going to change your life forever. In this video, I have broken down all the components that make a great story, and I will also answer some questions like where to find your stories, how to remember all the events of the story. So let's get started. So the first most important thing that any story has to have is the 5 second moment. So 5 second moment is basically a moment of intense emotion. Maybe you realize something and your life changes because of it. Maybe something very wholesome happens, something very bad happens, you get scammed, you get beaten up or something. Take any great movie, Avengers, Titanic, and there is going to be a 5 second moment. Now, the main theme of the story doesn't have to match this 5 second moment, but everything you tell in the main theme is supposed to somehow enhance this 5 second moment. So, for example, if your 5 second moment is something sad, something very emotional, then everything you tell in the main theme is supposed to make this moment more sadder, more emotional. Let me give you some realistic example. So, in Avengers Endgame, the main theme is supposed to be heroes fighting villains, but the 5 second moment is Iron Man's sacrifice. Now, if you think about it, Iron Man's sacrifice itself is not that emotional. People die all the time, it is nothing new. But in a story where Iron Man has a small family, a cute little daughter who looks up to him,
Give me a handful of crickets on a bed of lettuce. That's what you want. How did you? Look at this.
What?
Really?
and there is no reason for him to fight anymore. But then he remembers Peter Parker, who was also like a son to him. He remembers his last words and he was not able to save him.
All right. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. Hurry. I don't want to go. I don't want to go, sir. Please. Please, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Sir.
That makes him feel guilty. He goes out of his way, does everything possible to save the world, and in the process, sacrifices himself. People gather around him, and it is a very sad, emotional moment. That makes a great story. The same thing with Titanic. The main theme is supposed to be a historical event where a ship is fighting an iceberg and the ship drowns. But the 5 second moment is nothing related to the historical event of ship. It is hero's sacrifice for the heroine. And that itself is not very sad. Like again, people die all the time and couples are separated and stuff. But when you look at the main theme, their backstory, how they got close to each other, and then you see them getting separated, that makes you feel sad. Now, generally, the 5 second moment is going to be at the end of a story. So, to make it more intense, more emotional, you need to start the story by conveying something that is opposite of this 5 second moment. So, for example, if your story is about you getting cheated by your partner, most people will start the story by saying that there was this toxic bitch and I knew that she was going to cheat on me. She was a red flag. She was this, she was that. But that is more of a rant than a story. Start your story with the opposite. Tell how you cared about each other so much, how there were some small wholesome moments, some small nice things you did for each other, how you two first met, and how you are feeling so happy to be with this person. And then eventually you start noticing some strange things happening. And in the end, the 5 second moment can be you finding out that you're being cheated and you're feeling heartbreak, you're feeling intense emotions, and maybe you're crying, and that can make people connect to you better. The second thing is authenticity. So, in a lot of your stories, you're going to have some cringe, embarrassing moments, and you might not want to share them because you will think that what if people laugh on me, what if they make fun of me or something. But if by any chance you are sharing something personal, something embarrassing, something cringe, and people laugh on you because of that, then you are telling the story to wrong people. Those people are toxic. For a normal, healthy human being, at least in my experience, when they listen to a story, your heartbreak, your embarrassing stuff, your cringe moments from the past, they will not laugh on you. They will think it is very relatable to them because no one is perfect. Everyone has their own cringe and embarrassing moments. And because you are sharing something so personal, so embarrassing, it is like a secret to you, they will connect to you. The next thing is immersion. Your audience should completely forget that they are in a room talking to you. They should feel like they're teleported to a different imaginary world where they are the main character and they are the one living your story right now. And there are two ways you can do this. First, tell your story in present tense, and two, describe the location. Let me give you an example. If I say that I was with a friend 2 days ago and we were eating popcorn, You don't imagine anything. But if I say that I'm sitting on a sofa at my friend's house and it is a pretty luxurious house, it looks pretty expensive, and my friend is sitting right next to me and we are eating popcorn, there is a lot of things you can imagine. I can also say that I'm standing in a train with my friend and there is a bag of popcorn in my hands and we are eating popcorn. You still have something to imagine. The next thing is suspense. So, in your stories, there are going to be some moments where the whole story can change based on a certain event. So, for example, if you're confessing to a girl, her response can be anything from a slap to a kiss. And when you reach this point in your story, start speaking slowly in terms of volume so that people have to get closer to you. They have to lean in so that they can listen to what you have to say, and they are literally at the edge of their seats. Slow down your speed of speaking so that people get more impatient. They want to listen to what you have to say, but you're not saying it directly. And if you want to, go a bit off topic. Don't go completely out of context. Stay in the story but say some unnecessary details. The next important thing is the flow of the story. So if you tell your stories like this happened and then this happened and then I did this, it sounds more like you're stating some facts instead of stories. You can replace the word and with the word but and tell the same story to make it more interesting. This happened, but then this happened, but I did this. It sounds more interesting. Even though you are telling the same thing, the same sequence of events, using but make it sound like you were expecting something, but something else happened, and now you are in a bit of a difficult situation. If you want some example, then pause and read this. The next element is pain. So when you tell stories, your goal is that when people go home, when they go to sleep, they should think about your stories. Your story should literally appear in their dreams. They should literally be shaken up by your stories and think about it for a few more days. And the way to do that is by telling stories with unsatisfying, painful endings. So imagine a story where there is you, there is a girl, you like the girl, you confess to her, and she says yes, you get married, and it is a happy ending. It is a nice story, but it is nothing special. Now, imagine a story where there is you, there is the girl you like, you play some psychological games, you get her phone number, some drama happens, you finally confess to her on WhatsApp, she sees the message, she doesn't reply, you wait for a few more days, and you find out that she is gone forever. You are never going to see her again, and you will never know what she wanted to say. This story is going to be remembered by people more compared to the first story. Now, this does not mean that you are supposed to change the ending of a story to make it more sad and depressing because that is not authentic. What it does mean is that if you are supposed to tell a story to someone, then pick a story with painful ending instead of a story with happy, perfect ending. Let's look at the questions now. And the first question you might have is that where do I find my stories? So, if your life isn't perfect, then your life is going to have a lot of ups and downs, and those ups and downs can be your stories. The moments of extreme pain, sadness, happiness, anger, guilt, frustration, all those things. Now, this also does not mean that anything unusual that happens in your life is a story. If you're walking on a street and you see a bag of money on the road and you take that bag with you, that is unusual, but that is not a story. It is not shaking your emotions, and if it cannot shake your emotions, then it is not going to shake your audience's emotion. The same thing when going on a trip. It might be a fun thing for you, but it is not shaking your emotion. You are happy, but that is the only emotion you are feeling. But if you go on a trip and something interesting happens, then that can be a story. You basically need to find your 5-second moment, and you can do that by asking these questions to yourself. Question number one: did you ever say something hurtful to someone and that person got really sad, and then you feel like you went too far and you are feeling guilty for saying that? Question number two: did a girl ever reject you? Question number three: did you ever feel betrayed by someone close to you? Question number four: what was the most wholesome moment of your entire life? The next question: how to remember all the events of your story? Are you supposed to memorize every word of the story? Are you supposed to remember when to take pause, when to speak slowly, when to speak fast, all those stuff? Not really. Just remember the locations, and that is more than enough. Start the part of the story by describing the location around you, and then start telling all the events of the story that you can remember. When you do this, when you imagine yourself in the location of the event and the event is happening right in front of you will start feeling the emotions you were feeling during that time. And when something interesting happens, you will automatically slow down. When something boring happens, you will just start speaking faster, and your brain will automatically take care of all this complicated stuff. Also, one more thing to remember here is that tell your stories as many times as possible. Even though I logically know all these rules of telling stories, the first time I tell any story, it is pretty terrible. The more I repeat the same story to a lot of people, the more I refine it, the more I remove some unnecessary parts, add some more interesting parts. I know when to take pause, and I remember all the words I'm supposed to use to describe the events of the story. Just assume that the first time you tell any story, it is going to be terrible. And to get over this first few times of telling stories, you can start writing your stories down on a piece of paper or maybe even on your phone. The next question: when to lie in your stories. So, in your stories, there are going to be some moments where you're supposed to give context to your audience, but that context is pretty boring. You cannot skip the context because it is necessary to explain the story. So, in these situations, as long as it doesn't change the ending of a story or the whole 5 second moment thingy, it is okay to lie. You can skip some unnecessary part. So, for example, if there is someone with you in the story, but that person is not adding anything to the story, don't mention that person. If there is some conversation that happened for 5 to 6 days and you are supposed to explain the conversation for the story, don't tell that on day one we talked about this, on day two we talked about this, on day three we talked about this. Tell the whole conversation as if it happened on just one day. So, if you want to see me telling a story, then check out this video. If you want me to help you one tone, then check out the link in the description. And thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.